Joining us now on Setting the Pace, he is the sideline reporter and the pregame and postgame host on Bally Sports Indiana. It's Jeremiah Johnson. JJ, year number 10 we found out before we started the podcast, so pretty big milestone for you. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Alex and Facci. How many years for you guys doing the podcast?
Five deep. Just had the 5-year
5?
anniversary, recently. And yeah, I think overall that's like 700 plus episodes for us.
That's impressive. I think I have to check with Pat. Sideline guys will be relaunching here in the next week. So I think I could even go to iTunes and scroll through and see. I think they're almost all still on there. So I could probably count, or maybe I could have my youngest son do a chore and say, go through and count all these. But yeah, it sure has been. It's flown by, even though 10 years is a long time. And like I tell people, I don't take it for granted, and I'm happy to keep doing it as long as they'll let me.
Oh, absolutely. And JJ, we're excited to have you back. It's just there's something about this time of the year where we get to see all those familiar faces again, and it's a lot of fun. But you mentioned 10 years. What's your level for excitement for this Pacers team compared to last year? Because obviously going into the season, a little bit of a different vibe this year compared to last year.
Yeah, there was so much uncertainty 1 year ago that people would ask me questions about what to expect, and I could say something, but I really had no idea. And it is one of those things, for the previous 8 years, let's say, I always went into the year thinking, all right, I'm at least going to need to keep my schedule open, for the middle of April, hopefully the end of April. I don't want to schedule anything for early May. And last year was the first year that I kind of, even though I never wanted to officially say it, it felt like that game in New York, even though it was game 82, there was finality. Then you got to January and you're looking at the standings and you're fourth or fifth. And I'm like, man, playoff opportunities are there. So the season went, so much better than anyone could have hoped or anticipated, I think, just because they were able to find out exactly what they had in Tyrese Halliburton. They were able to unlock a little bit of Miles Turner, that even though he had been with the team, for 7 years, another layer to his game that people didn't know was there. And then, you're able to see that Benedict Mathurin is someone that you can build around. And while it didn't end in the playoffs, I think everything is a possibility for this season. So the excitement level is high. Last year I was probably as excited about anything was just to get back on the road, because I feel like I can do my job so much better on the road. And even though it wasn't a season where you were saying, okay, this is a team that's going to be fighting for home court advantage or a playoff spot, it was still fun to be on the road. Now to go on the road with a team that is going to be one that's not just, the Pacers are in town. I think the Pacers probably won some games last year because no one expected anything. Now people are going to be excited to see this team around the league. They're going to be hyping up Halliburton and Mathurin and Turner. So there's a lot to be excited about. It does feel like that game in Madison Square Garden, game 82, that seems like such a long time ago. I'm ready to get going.
I don't blame you. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of expectations from fans this year for this team to be a playoff team. Now, I know the team has not necessarily said that on the record. They're kind of still evaluating things and looking at things with the long term. But in terms of this roster and how everything's been kind of focused on training camp battles and, lineups and rotations, is there a certain player maybe on the roster that you're thinking can make a big jump this year?
It does seem like Benedict Mathurin is the one that when you saw him in the first half of the season, you were just thinking about the potential, the comparisons, all of the things that he could do. And he maybe flattened out a little bit, maybe a little bit of the rookie wall, even though maybe it was a little bit of the scouting, I think, more than anything, because I don't think I noticed him getting fatigued. He's in such good shape and he works so hard. But I think there was maybe a scouting report out on him. And so that's, to me, the area where if he can add some other layers to his game, he takes the next jump in terms of just physicality and has that year under his belt. And he's most likely, we don't know this for sure, but you go from a guy that's coming off the bench to a guy that's probably starting games and are going to have to accept a more difficult assignment defensively from the opening tip, and to be able to coexist more with established NBA players instead of coming off the bench and just saying, I'm going to be able to come in and get 8 points in the first 4 minutes I'm on the court. You can't think that way when you're starting. So he's the player that should make the biggest jump, and I'm probably most excited about, just because some of the things that he does in games or in practice, they make you not, I don't want to like throw names of players out there, but he does some things that the average NBA player can't do. So if he can pick up those other aspects of the game that maybe he struggled in his rookie year, it's a jump that can help him, but in turn helps the Pacers make that next step.
No, he's a special player, no doubt about it. Really excited to see the leap he goes from rookie to sophomore. That's where most players, take that biggest step forward. So for Mathurin, it feels like the sky's the limit. But you talked about Mathurin, but which offseason addition, whether it's Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd, or acquiring Obi Toppin and Bruce Brown, which of those players are you most excited to see in a Pacers uniform this year?
Probably Obi Toppin, and because you said excited, I think he's going to be one of those guys that when you're watching, your eyes are immediately drawn to. Last season, for a lot of the time, you were just like, wherever Tyrese Halliburton is, you're going to watch. But I think you're going to have to kind of have an eye to the top of the key, and then you're going to be looking at the corner of your eye saying, what's Obi Toppin doing? But the one thing that I wanted to point out, and I thought it was good to see early on in that first preseason game, is something I saw in the first couple of practices that I watched, is his three-point shot. While he made a lot of shots against the Pacers, he seemed like he had his best games against the Pacers. All you heard about from July until October was the lobs and the running the floor. You didn't hear a lot of talk about the three-point shooting and the ability to space, and that's important to Rick Carlisle. And to me, that's probably one aspect of his game that maybe this team wants to see the most from him early, because they do obviously have some decisions to make about his contract. And I've seen him confidently knock down three-point shots in practice. You saw it, one of his first opportunities in the game against Memphis. And so I'm most excited just to see if he can be unlocked. We've seen players come to Indiana that either didn't have a big role or didn't get a lot of opportunities, and they've really flourished. And it just seems like this is going to be perfect for him. And I just love, you guys are energetic, enthusiastic podcasters and fans. It warms my heart to see someone that's a lottery pick that had been playing in New York City that just will not hesitate in saying how happy he is to be an Indiana Pacer. And so with that alone, everyone needs to just wrap their arms around Obi Toppin and see what happens on the court.
Yeah, I think that's a Tyrese Halliburton effect, and I think that that's going to continue to happen as we see Tyrese just emerge into a better player and maybe make that next step into an All-NBA kind of guy. But speaking of 8th overall picks, Jarris Walker, I thought his debut in the preseason was really fun to see. It was all over the place, just like he was in Summer League, and he too has a very fun personality, seems really excited to be here. What did you see from Jarris in that first preseason game, and maybe some of the things you've noticed from him in practice?
Yeah, I think that he is a little bit like Mathurin in that he doesn't look like a rookie. He looks older than he is. And these guys come into the league having played so many games at a young age. And they both had played at a high level. Ben was playing in Mexico at the NBA Academy and IMG, Jarris Walker. And even though, limited college experience, they're just maybe more developed than the average first-year player used to be, let's say even 5 or 10 years ago. And so I think it may take a little bit of time offensively, but that preseason game, now granted, you're going against Memphis is probably second and third unit players. I love the confidence that he had, some of the passes that he made. So I wasn't sure, and part of it is just the roster. There's really 12 guys, maybe even 13, that can make a case to deserve to be in a rotation, and your average rotation is 9.5. And so it made sense that maybe he might be on the outside looking in day one, but maybe he plays his way in this preseason where you can't have him off the floor. And the defense that he'll bring, the rebounding that he'll add, that this team has needed for a number of years, that's big. But I'm interested to see the playmaking skills, because I don't think you could expect great shooting, but the confidence to shoot the shot, I think, is good as well.
I thought his shot looked real good in that first preseason game compared to Summer League, where he struggled a little bit. So that had me feeling, hey, you know what, that procedure to clean up his elbow, maybe that had something to do with it. Not sure, but the shot looked good. But you talked about potentially 12 or 13 guys that really going to be playing for playing time, fighting for playing time. The theme seems to be competition. there is a lot of competition. That's probably the word tossed around most this offseason. How deep do you feel that this Pacers team is compared to some of the teams over the last few years? Because the 18 they brought into training camp this year compared to last year, it looks significantly better.
It's probably almost deeper than most coaches would want, because I think that if you ask the coach, you like there to be some clear separation and some role definition. In training camp, it's great because the competition for playing time, this team should, when everyone is healthy, be, to me, one of the best preseason teams because everyone is sort of fighting to prove something. But it could be problematic at times if you don't have the right guys. This is where I do think they've got the kind of personalities of players that if you just, without saying names, if I think right now about some ones that if they're out of the rotation, will they pout? Will they sulk? I don't see it happening. And one of the things in an NBA season is there are always going to be injuries. And so, sometimes things just kind of take care of themselves. But I joked, if they had a true first team, second team, and third team, that it might be the best. The third team always used to wear yellow jerseys in practice. They call them the mustard team, I think, at times. I said that the mustard team could be the best mustard team in my 10 years with the Pacers. They've kind of mixed it up a little bit. So I don't think they're really doing a clear separation because they don't really want to tell anybody right now you're on the outside looking in. But the depth is impressive, and they will be well positioned if and when you get those bumps and bruises or minor injuries during the course of the season.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that not kind of setting the pecking order, aside from maybe Tyrese and Miles, who they've been on the record saying those are the only two guys guaranteed to start, it does make it a little bit healthier in terms of that competition. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think one thing I did want to bring up, and it's perfect in this forum with you because you two analyze every game and you're on every day, and sometimes even at halftime I noticed some tweets from some people. Well, why isn't Jarris Walker playing? And he didn't play in the first half; he played in the second half. What I would like to caution most people that would be listening to this is have a little bit of a patient approach. It's understandable if, let's say, the first Saturday at Cleveland game 2, someone who you had high hopes for is not playing. If you expect the player to handle it well, the fans have to understand there are 12 or 13 guys. So for every one guy that might not be playing, then you have to be prepared to say who should be sitting if that person is playing. And there are probably going to be some games where the rotation switches and a guy that maybe got 22 minutes on one night, maybe second half of the back-to-back, he's out of the rotation. And it's not because they're resting him, but maybe it's a different matchup. So I did want to get that point out there. Don't overreact to the first 5 and the first 4 off the bench on opening night. What did we see from Andrew Nembhard opening night last year?
Didn't play.
He didn't play.
Yeah. And he ended up having a pretty nice rookie year.
Yeah, and that's
I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, that's a great point. And I think, we heard Carlisle say even in these preseason games, it's going to be a carryover of training camp. So I think that they're still trying to figure it out. And maybe the guys that were here, maybe a little bit more of a veteran presence, guys that have been in the league a couple of years, give them the first nod to kind of see what they can do with that second unit. And we'll see what happens without Tyrese, without Tice yesterday, without Nembhard. I thought the rotations were a little bit too much to read into in terms of what they probably envision for the long term, but we'll see. I mean, you don't take a guy 8th overall on Jarris Walker to probably not play him very much. That's one of those things where that's why I was like, okay, he didn't play till the second half, but let's not overthink this. I think the case for Ben Shepherd's a little bit different just because he was the 26th pick and you already have a ton of guards there. But one guy that I know that people are kind of curious about in terms of what his role might be is an Aaron Nesmith. And last year came in, played the 4. He even talked about playing more of the 3 this year. We've talked about this a little bit on the podcast already, but what kind of differences do you envision for him switching from the 4 to the 3? And do you think that's a better fit for him with this team?
I thought he did some really good things at the 4. Some of it just depends on who he has to guard on the other end of the floor. But in talking with some of the people in Boston, they had a nickname for him that I don't know that we've used as much, but I think they called him Crash Nesmith because
he hates it.
Yeah, well, I haven't used it as much. Maybe that reporter isn't his favorite one. He's like, how's Crash doing? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah. But there is some validity to it, is that he does crash the boards really well, and you need a guy like that. And that's maybe you think of more of your 4 than than your three. The thing that I would say is it felt like his 3-point shooting was so hot and cold last season, and whoever you put out there at the three, you really need to be maybe a reliable 3-point shooter. The best thing, though, is he is a guy that should be able to guard any wing that's out there. He's one of your best wing defenders, I think. And if the roster wasn't so deep, he would be in such a great position to, be the person maybe that I would answer Facci's question about, taking the leap, or whether it's your question. If there wasn't so much competition, I do think he could take a big leap. And I do like what I've seen from him. Physically, he's so much stronger. And even in talking with him, there's a confidence that I felt like last year, even until about January or February, he was really trying to prove himself because he hadn't had a lot of opportunity. And now I think he's just comfortable. He's one of those guys that's kind of quiet. He's maybe not going to be everybody's best friend on the team, but I do feel like he's more comfortable with his teammates this season, more comfortable with the media. And so I hope he still gets that opportunity, whether it's the 3 or the 4 off the bench. It remains to be seen. But, I couldn't tell you right now what that bench rotation would look like. So nothing would surprise me if he even gets he could get some 4 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that he was, I don't know if you want to say an unsung hero or not, but playing out of position, they needed him last year. And I think that that's someone the fan base fell in love with. And he really was kind of the X factor for the Pacers, because when he had it going offensively, they were a significantly better team, but also defensively, he was someone they really needed to count on. So we're all rooting for him. But you talked about this Pacers team, maybe if they have some bumps and bruises or some players being out of the rotation one night, just taking a game off, anything of that sort. TJ McConnell right now, he's 23. He's 31 years old. He's the veteran on this team. I mean, I'm older than 31, and it made me feel ancient because it's like we're considering TJ McConnell to be this like true vet, but the Pacers need it because we heard so many guys compliment James Johnson, George Hill, great veterans for this team that are no longer with the Pacers. We saw McConnell have 7 assists, 0 turnovers in the first quarter. No Halliburton, no Nembhard. How vital is his veteran presence to this Pacers team as they're so young?
Yeah, it's really important, and I'll even lump Buddy Hield into that category as well, in that you've got a lot of young players. Tyrese obviously has a great personality, so I'm kind of removing him from this kind of generalization, but you have a lot of quiet guys, some of those youngsters that maybe hadn't, had a chance to be a leader. You need guys like Buddy Hield and TJ McConnell, because to me, and I noticed it just being back on the road again, they liven the mood, whether it's on the bus on the way back from shoot around, or, the guys that are making someone laugh on the airplane. You hear Tyrese all the time, but TJ and Buddy serve a role in the grind of an 82-game season, picking up guys when they're down, keeping the mood light, maybe saying something that you wouldn't expect. And for TJ specifically, it's easy for someone to say, okay, you got Halliburton, he's your point guard, and Nembhard showed he could start off the ball, but he's your backup of the future. And, you push TJ McConnell to the side. I'd be careful about doing that, because he is coming off the best year of his career. He is now someone who has to be at least respected from outside the arc, and he'll never forget how to hit that 7-foot baseline jumper, and he gets into the paint so effectively. So the leadership, I think, is important for him. If there's a night he's not playing, he's not going to pout either. He's going to understand. But I don't see him going quietly into that role anytime soon. He probably could be someone that is an OG James Johnson type in the next 3 or 4 years, but he's not there yet. He serves a role on the court and then on the bench as well.
That's a great point, and I think that's something that maybe we've even overlooked a little bit in talking about this team, because when you talk about them generally, like you said, like the talent-wise, maybe it does make sense to move off of a veteran here or there to clear up space for younger guys to get that opportunity, but what they bring to a locker room and what they bring for team morale and team chemistry is something that you don't see in the box score. So I think that is definitely something to keep an eye on if you're a Pacer fan. Like, don't dismiss veterans as much as maybe we have a little bit, and maybe we need to do a better job of that too. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and I think it's just great what TJ's done in terms of just the second longest tenured Pacer, which is just so funny to think about. McConnell, that is, but has that new partnership with Jack's Donuts where he's got the McConnell coffee now. That was super cool. and I absolutely loved Buddy Hield yelling on the way to the plane for the first road trip in Memphis after Oklahoma defeated Texas. I'm sure him and Miles had a nice little conversation there about that game when he just screamed and social sent that out. But I wanted to talk about Buddy Hield because Buddy Hield is someone that has great chemistry with Tyrese, and it appears that he'll most likely be coming off the bench this year in a totally different role, potentially not playing as much with Tyrese. And did you notice last year a drop off from Buddy at all when he played without Tyrese? And maybe how do you envision his role this year on this team?
Probably. I mean, I think everyone plays better with Tyrese, and he got a lot of shots because you had to respect Tyrese's 3-point shooting, and you wouldn't sag off on Tyrese to help on Buddy. And so, and just the inherent knowledge that Tyrese had, he knew where Buddy would be, he knew where he likes to catch the ball. They played together a lot. So, but I wouldn't necessarily say, okay, well, he came off the bench. He wasn't as effective the last month of the year. I mean, I almost like to say from kind of mid-March to the end of the season, kind of throw it out because there were a lot of different things going on. You know, not just Tyrese. Miles was out for a while. They were playing young players. It just wasn't the same team. So I still think he could be effective. And I think that if he's on the second unit and TJ McConnell is there and TJ drives in the paint, you don't think he's going to know where Buddy is, and he's going to get him some shots as well. Maybe he's a little bit more the focal point of the defense if he's in that second unit. That's the big thing. And I did see him put it on the, go off dribble a little bit against Memphis more than, just the catch and shoot that you're used to. So he can show some extra things to his game. The big thing is just going to be, picking it up defensively. It's not just Buddy, but it's the entire team. They've got to do a little bit better job defensively, and that could be where the minutes in the starting lineup is determined.
I'm just really excited because there's a lot of players that you got to fit in the right situation, but it's a great problem to have. But Pacers have an identity. Having identity is extremely important. The days of the double bigs, they're done, but now we've really leaned into playing a fast-paced style offense. I think that, that you bring in Obi Toppin, you bring in Bruce Brown to complement how Tyrese likes to play. Do you feel the Pacers can be one of those more entertaining NBA League Pass type teams to the casual NBA fan?
I hope so, because then they'll be watching us, right? No, I mean, for sure. And I listened to the little snippet of Zach Lowe when he was going over the actual trade options, and he made a point to say he's moving the Pacers up quite a bit in his league pass rankings. I remember the 2017-18 season. I gave him the business all season long because we were either 29th or 30th, and in my 9 or 10 years, that still is going to go down as the most enjoyable season that I've had. And so, with expectations, hopefully the Pacers can live up to it. But one of the tweets that went out there in the summer, once the Pacers acquired Toppin and Brown, about the fastest players in transition, Tyrese, Obi, and Bruce Brown, and if they're playing a lot together, that says it all, right? I mean, every team acts like they want to play fast. Maybe not every. 27 to 28 of the teams in October are trying to play a faster brand of basketball. It always kind of slows down in the playoffs, but this is a team that, to succeed, they need to be able to play fast, but they've just got to be able to get back and play defense also.
That's a great point. Defense is going to be key for this season, and that's been the emphasis at training camp as well as position battles, but we're going to see how that plays out, because I love what Carlisle said. I think second day of practice, he's like, talk is cheap. We got to go out there and show it. I'm like, thank you. Because I was like, it's only like 2 days in and I'm tired of hearing about it. Like, I just want to see how they perform. And I felt like against Memphis, the defense wasn't great. So It's just a continued work in progress. But, Obi Toppin having to guard a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr., that's not going to be an easy matchup for him because Jaren's a lot bigger than him. So I just feel like expectations are at a great spot right now because there's not a lot of them in terms of what the coaching staff's putting out there or the front office. And the goal is to make the playoffs, but that should be the goal every single season for the players because that's what they want to do, is ultimately win. But, thinking about this year compared to that 17-18 team like you talked about, do you see any comparisons with any of the personalities or the players there, aside from Miles because he's still on the roster, but from that team to this team, do you see any comparisons in terms of like how the roster fits and maybe some personality wise?
Well, I've mentioned how much that I thought Buddy and TJ were important. And if I think back to that team, you had the young emerging stars and Victor having his best year and Sabonis turning into an all-star. But when I really think about that team, the two guys that kind of stand out to me the most were Thaddeus Young and Darren Collison. And they were guys that were in that 29 to 30, 31 range that had been around for a while. But they were really important in bringing the best out of their teammates. Maybe it just so happened to help that they were great with me and the media, and I felt like there was just something about the professionalism that they had. And I'm not saying that the Pacers vets are at all comparable to them, but I think the role that the Pacers vets have, and let's throw Tyson into the mix. People don't know a lot about him, but he's had a lot of success playing basketball. And if I think of those three guys, I think they're going to be really important in bringing out the best from the youngsters that the Pacers have this year. And so the Pacers were probably maybe a little bit more poised than we thought, because Sabonis and Oladipo were a little bit older than the guys that the Pacers have that they want maybe to make that next step right now. But the mix is what I think is really important. And it's one of those things the front office can never fully anticipate what's a good chemistry experiment and what isn't. And in the last 10 years, you can think of some years that just the mix didn't work, when Paul George got hurt, or when they tried to bring in, Teague, Ellis. This isn't necessarily to say anything about them, but just the entire mix did not work then. And I think the mix is going to be important this year. And that's why I was as concerned when I heard the reports about Buddy, about taking his 3-point shooting away, as I was just the vibe that I thought he brought. And so I hope they can always have room for those guys that are 28 to 30, that maybe they're just a little bit past their best days, but they still have a lot of good basketball in front of them. But I think to be a really team that's going to have success, you got to have some guys like that. So that would be maybe the comparison. But the difference is, Zach Lowe thought we were 29th or 30th, and I had no idea what to expect. I was just hoping and praying they could get in the playoffs, and they exceeded those expectations. Maybe it's more internally than externally, because I still see a lot of people making their playoff projections, and it seems like most people say Pacers 9th or 10th. Mm-hmm. So I feel like they can exceed those expectations, but there is a quiet little murmur going around the NBA that you better keep an eye on the Pacers. So I think there's probably a little bit more expectations even for this team than that one, but there's the potential to be just as fun. And, Tyrese Halliburton's probably a big reason for that.
I think it's better to be underdogs than have too much pressure on that. We work well in a situation where we could exceed expectations rather than having high expectations. But talking about this group as a whole, look, not many expected Coach Carlisle to be rebuilding at this point in his career, anything of that sort, but it feels like that timeline has sped up. Last year felt like almost 2 seasons in one. How much fun do you feel that Rick's having with this group as they might be looking to push for a playoff spot?
Rick Carlisle is someone that has a lot of pride and passion for the Indiana Pacers. He, for all the time that he spent in Dallas, this was where, it all started for him. When you think about the days as an assistant coach and, then previously serving as a head coach, and his relationship, let's just say, with Larry Bird, who was at practice last week, I think is important. And so it's not like he's at a point where he is counting the days or thinking, I gotta retire. Like, if he feels young and if he's enjoying things, then I don't know that part really matters. What really matters to him is, I think he wants to, before he hangs it up, he wants to get the Pacers a championship. I mean, how cool would that be to kind of to come full circle and to do that? And so what's the best way to do that? Well, when he got the job, it was a different team. And I think it was worth trying to see if it would work. Once the decision was made at that trade deadline that first year, it was clear that it was going to be it was going to be kind of the long haul. It was going to be a big picture approach. That didn't change his mentality of wanting to get this team back in that championship conversation. And who knows, one day maybe hang a banner. And so I don't think there was ever a time where he thought, this is going to take too long, I don't want to do this. In fact, I felt like to your point, he maybe was even invigorated a little bit more by the youth movement. The relationship with Halliburton, I think, is really strong. It's pretty important for your head coach and your best player to get along great. And I've seen nothing but a great relationship there. And I think that's a credit to Rick. It's also a credit to Tyrese. I think he respects what Rick has done as a player, as a coach, the amount of time he's put in the league. So it's not what you expected maybe when you make that hire and you have a little bit of an older team and you're trying to maybe make the pieces fit. But in hindsight, it's maybe the best thing possible because he is a guy that wants to see this all the way through and doesn't want to cut corners, even if it seems they maybe were able to skip a year. It feels that way to me, but I think they don't want to skip and say, okay, well, we skipped a year, so now just go all in now, because there still is this sort of big picture approach, because the ultimate goal is still to not be just a playoff team, is to win a championship.
Yeah, exactly. And I think knowing that Tyrese, your franchise guy, is going to be here for the next 5+ years, it does give you a little bit of that window to not feel like you have to rush to appease him. But at the same time, you still want to show him, hey, we're heading in the right direction. We're not just kind of staying in this spot where we're going to continue to be a team that could be a play-in team, but they want to make the right roster moves to get themselves into, like you said, a playoff contending team, eventually get into that spot where you could be, hey, this team can actually compete for a championship. So JJ, I do this a lot when we have players on and stuff like that. I don't think I've ever really talked with you about like non-basketball stuff, but I am curious. You've been an Indiana guy for a while. What are some of your go-to spots food-wise in Indy? And maybe give a shout out to one that is a little bit of a hole in the wall, support local business, that kind of thing.
Good question. And some of it just depends on location, where I'm at when I'm hungry. And one of my favorite spots before I moved to the suburbs was I lived near Butler, and I love the Yats at the original Yats for 54th and College.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't go there as much, but there's now times when I'm heading home from practice and I've got some extra time, I'll go pull off over there at Mass Ave and I'll get some Yats. I'm a big breakfast person, so I do enjoy Rise, Cafe Patachu. It's good to always start your day with a good breakfast. That's what I actually probably like as much on the road as well when I'm traveling, is get a good breakfast, kind of skip over lunch, get a quick bite in the media room before a game, and that breakfast can kind of send me on my way just a little bit. I did want to give a shout out to one place that's just opened in Zionsville, and it's called Our Place, and it's just a coffee shop, and it's at the old Noah Grant's, and Noah Grant's is now across the street. Noah Grant's is great. It's a little on the expensive side, so you can't go there that frequently, but great food at Noah Grant's. But Our Place is like this perfect coffee shop to me, because the coffee's great. It's a good atmosphere. You can sit in there and refill. And so lately I've been just going in there after taking my son to school every once in a while, and I'll just go and sit in there for 20 or 30 minutes and just have coffee. If you want a breakfast sandwich or a bagel, it's good. And I'll give them a shout out because I was just in today and they gave me a free coaster because they're celebrating their 1-year anniversary. So Shout out to Our Place Coffee in Zionsville.
Hey, love it. Always gotta respect, shouting out that the local businesses goes a long way. But JJ, my guy, we really appreciate you. Every time it feels like you come back on, it just feels like Pacer basketball is right around the corner. Best time of the year. Hey, want to shout you out. 10 years, 10th season. Hey, I'm looking forward to 10, 20, however many more that you want to keep going. We're going to be, still supporting you because you've always given us that support. So it goes a long way. But tell everybody where they can find you on social media.
Well, at Pacers JJ, and I actually have a little trick. I'm still on Twitter. Everyone else is on X now, but on my phone, I've still never updated the app, so I've still got the blue bird on my phone.
Wow.
So there's some benefits. It's still a retweet for me.
Wow,
my iPad did the automatic update, so there I've got the X, but the blue bird is still alive for me at Pacers JJ.
Keep going strong.
Yes, and on Instagram as well. I don't Instagram quite as much as I should. I know I got to get with the times, but when the season starts, I'll post more more photos.
What's up with these TV guys, Chris Sineri, Jeremiah Johnson? They can't get it figured out on the Instagram. You guys are supposed to be in front of the camera. What is going on here?
I know, but I don't love the like, hey, look at me every day. This is what I'm doing, and I feel like that's what I get from Instagram more than Twitter or X now. And I understand the Twitter platform has its weaknesses, but I was also the guy that had the newspaper in the driveway for the longest time. So I guess I'm just slow to adapt to change. That's probably my biggest issue. But I probably could. I need to get some tips from you guys on growing the brand a little bit, and maybe I could even get on TikTok. But it just seems so. When I see some of the stuff that people waste their time with, not that I waste plenty of time on social media, but mostly it's just scrolling through Twitter. But I'm never that satisfied with what I see on Instagram, so I just don't go there as much, I guess.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. My Instagram is pretty much just resharing these videos and pictures of my baby. I got nothing else going on in my life, so you're really not missing that much. But you are a great follow on Twitter, so everybody make sure that you are following.
And I'll be tweeting. Or what do you say? Do you say Xing?
No. We're tweeting out here.
Tweeting.
There's no Xing. There's none of that.
I'll be tweeting a lot more now that the season's going, and I'll try to share, snippets from practice and comments from players and some analysis when the situation warrants itself. So looking forward to it. And the sideline guys, we haven't gotten an official date for the first show of the new season, but it'll be in the next week or so.
That's great.
I'm excited.
I will say too, if you guys haven't already, make sure you do go listen to one of the sideline guys episodes where they interviewed Roy Hibbert.
Yes, from the offseason.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those ones where you can always go back and listen to. It's kind of like not timely in terms of like what's happening currently, so it's great to go back and listen to some of the old Pacers talk. And I love Roy Hibbert. How can you not love Roy? Just a fun personality for sure.
It was. I'm glad you brought that up because I kind of had forgotten about it that we did it in the summer, and I didn't know how it would go because, to be honest, once he left, my only real interaction with him, I had probably two. One was in the Lakers locker room, and it could not have been more uncomfortable, and he was not pleasant at all. And then a few years go by, and he was actually helping the 76ers, I think the pandemic season.
Yep.
And I did go up to him and talk to him, and then he was like full of smiles and really nice. But, I mean, he took it to another level on that podcast and did not hesitate in sharing any story that we asked him. So that was a fun one.
I just think that he's in a much, much better headspace now, and it's awesome to see. And also, he's been doing like a bunch of like jiu-jitsu or MMA or whatever it is. I mean, awesome. I can't even imagine what it's like to go up against someone 7'2", Roy Hibbert size. But, awesome that, you guys were able to have him on. It's a great listen. And I love nothing more than being able to bring back those guests of the past. So let me know if you ever have any luck with Danny Granger, because that's another Pacer fan. All us Pacer fans, we need to just hear from Danny Granger, Roy Hibbert, those guys. They mean so much to us. So awesome job being able to get Roy. Everybody, you have to check out that episode. JJ, we really appreciate having you back on, and best of luck this season.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I'll be spending some time on the airplanes listening to Setting the Pace this season. So keep me entertained.
We will.
We will do that for sure, JJ. We will be right back after this, guys.